We're Sacred. We need to push the palisades together on the next push. Okay.
They're behind us on the port side actually.
I'm into myself. I'm gonna need a heal now. I'm showering this and detonating. Okay, we made the play. What's going on, guys? We're going to talk about the new build. I've been using this since the big patch came out. I've been theory crafting it beforehand, never got a chance to make a video about it, but we're going to talk about it now. It's the medium spear IG. It's extremely fun, not that hard to use to be honest, but there is a skill ceiling to it for sure. Depending on the build, either be elemental aversion or shirking fortification, it's going to be either expensive or cheaper, but let's talk about the pros and the cons. So starting off, let's talk about it being extremely tanky, and the reason being is because you have a lot of fortification, either be from Shirking fortification, the Entomb, just the Ice Gauntlet in general, providing you 20% extra fortification after you use the spell, and the amount of dodges you have is insane, because you're a medium dex, you have at least 4 dodges, and assuming you hit them, you get invigorated crits, you could even get more dodges on top of that. Second off is the initiation. It's got great initiation. Why? Because it has Ice Shower, it's got Sweep, it can start off with something else first, but generally these are the two abilities that allows you to keep them in place, slowing them down, or just essentially setting up for a combo. And because it has Ice Gauntlet, it's able to peel. Ice Shower, one of the best spells in the game, rooting them, slowing them, rending them. But of course, because it's a spear, it does a lot of damage, and if you get empowerments, either be from your skewer, either be from exploited weakness when you apply the rends or the bleeds, your next couple of attacks are going to hit hard. And of course, it's very sticky. If you combine it with the animation cancel, as well as the tracking boost, which I'll be explaining later on the tips and tricks, you can just stick to them like glue. It's just a build that feels great because it's really well rounded, it can stick to them, it does damage, it's tanky, it's self-sustainable, it can initiate, it can peel, it just does a little bit of everything, and it's one of those builds that I don't even necessarily think are hard to play. Just wanted to give a shout out to new-world.guide. It's an amazing website. I've been implementing my builds, very easy to sort out, very easy to find. And if there's any other builds that you're looking for, you can go for the search bar and check it out. Of course, this wouldn't be possible to showcase my builds on my stream as easily as it is with their extension. So I just wanted to give them a shout out, and let's continue to the video. Alright, so let's start with the skill tree itself, and it's going to be the same for both Shirking Fortification and Elemental Aversion. So we're going to go with the Sweep, Skewer, and Perforate. Obviously, if you want to go for Javelin, it is possible to replace the Sweep for it, but I would recommend it mostly for the light builds. But for this specific build, we're going to just talk about the Sweep itself. The key perks to really keep in mind is essentially the ones that buffer you up, either be the Exploited Weakness whenever you have a debuff, stacks up 3 times, each debuff applying 10% bonus damage, such as the Perforate, such as the Bleed, and of course these Stamina perks, and this one here I want to mention is one that I never used because it never worked. In a recent patch they actually fixed it, and now I'm back on it. And as for the Ice Gauntlet, we're going to keep it the same as well for both Shirking Fortification and the Elemental Aversion builds. We're going to go for the max on the pylon itself, the Entomb and the Shower. It's going to be full utility based. The only thing you're going to be skipping is Empowered Frost, which is kind of a useless perk anyways. It did get buffed, but it's not ideal and it's not useful at all for this build. And the 1 point on Cold Reach, which is, again, it's not a major deal. It's 15% extra damage, but it's only a perk we can get some value out of. And as for the IG, most of the things we're looking for is just purely utility. We're going to have a lot of fortification with some CDR perks here. Nice abilities to survive, such as the Entomb that cleanses, gives you a little bit of health back. If you're running Healing Tomb on your Ice Gauntlet, you're getting about 1,800 health. Obviously the rend of movement speed included on the Ice Gauntlet, and of course there's going to be a couple of techs I'm going to show you guys a little bit later, but it's beautiful to see the interaction of Pylon and Rune Glass with Keen Speed. So I mean, let's just keep moving forward. As for the attributes itself, I would recommend, this is the safe approach, and sometimes I play with less con, depending on what mode I'm playing. If it's OPRs and arenas, I generally go 150 con, but if you want to go for the safe approach and get the most value out of the fortification itself, you would want to go for 200 con, 250 dex, and 50 plus strength. Every extra stat goes into strength after 50. But if you have, let's just say, some gear pieces of too much strength, maybe you can go down to 200 dex and 100 strength in that regard. That's what I was doing in my ult until I ended up fixing it. The ideal situation is that you have the 250 dex perk. It's amazing, gives bonus to random critical hit damage against stun, slowed, or rooted enemies, and also the 200 has some more bonuses such as the backstab damage. The 100 stat perk on strength is not ideal. It's only for slashing and strike damage, so I believe strike damage only applies to the sweep itself, not to coup de grace, because coup de grace is thrust, but for the sweep itself I believe it's strike. So that's the only benefit you'd be getting from there, and obviously some better stat scaling when it comes to the damage itself. But the 50 strength is mandatory, 10% damage to melee physical basic attacks, and that's combined with what I would prefer to go with Enchanted as my secondary damage perk, makes a lot of value from it. Alright, now we're going to be talking about the gear itself, and we're going to start off with the elemental aversion approach. I would recommend the Shirking fortification, even though the Shirking fortification is a lot more expensive. However, if you want to go for a cheaper approach and you want to just mostly use it in OPRs, and maybe your OPRs are full of mages, fire mages, VGIGs, and all that shenanigans, then elemental aversion approach would be the go-to. So let's continue here and talk about it. So the only mandatory skill perk you need for this build is Skewer, and ideally you should have Skewer on your gear. Now if you have it on your weapon and you already have a 3 perk spear with Skewer included, then go for it. But ideally, your main weapon, your primary weapon, which will be the spear, of course in this build as IG is just a utility purpose, needs to have at least 2 damage perks. Okay, and we're gonna go talk about that later on. But for the meantime, what do you need for the spear itself? You're gonna need at least a couple of elemental aversions. You can mix physical aversion and elemental aversion, it's up to you. Ideally, best case scenarios, you have 4 elemental aversion and 1 physical aversion, or 3 elemental aversion and 2 physical aversion. Now this also depends on what you're mostly facing, but I would say that's just a general consistency that you can get, and it's easier to equip your gems according to how much elemental aversion you have. Other than that, obviously playing medium weight loadout, you're going to have an extra piece of freedom. So it means that with just 2 minimum freedom pieces on your gear, you're going to have the bare minimum of 3, which means you can get out of roots and CCs a lot faster without requiring to gas out as fast to dodge abilities such as the Shockwave or the Scream setups. But other than that, 5 resilient, mandatory for pretty much every build in the game here. And then on top of that, you're going to have minimum 2 freedom. You're going to have at least 2 to 3 elemental aversion minimum. The more the merrier, of course. And the same thing goes for the freedom itself. And then the Skewer perk. And perhaps if you have an extra piece and you don't want to spend so much money for elemental freedom resilient, instead get Pylon Burst. And I'll show you guys the tech from it, but assuming you guys go for Pylon Burst, you're just going to have your Heart Rune charged up a lot faster than usual. Alright, so if you are going for the more expensive approach, the ideal approach, this is what I would recommend. If you want to know why I'm going Shirking fortification in this patch compared to elemental aversion, I'm not going to be going thoroughly on this video, but if you want to check it out, my TLDR answer, go to my stream, type exclamation Shirking, and it'll show up a TLDR resolution of why I'm going for Shirking fortification instead of elemental aversion. However, let's just be on topic here, Shirking fortification instead of elemental aversion. If you want to go for this approach, then you must go for at least bare minimum 4 Shirking fortification and 2 freedom. 5 pieces resilient, of course. Anything else is a bonus, so if you go 5 Shirking fortification, that's amazing. You're going to get a lot of damage mitigation for all types of damage when it procs. It also scales really well with your Oak Flesh. It scales also with Fortifying Perforate if you have that as your 3rd perk on your spear. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you do have it, it also escalates, it snowballs the effects of Fortify. Tomb also amplifies its effects, so it's great. Anyways, this gear would look something along the lines of 5 Shirking fortification, 4 freedom, Skewer on the gear, and 5 piece resilience. In this kind of build, I would not recommend Pylon Burst. The reason why is it's so demanding in the Shirking Fortification category that you can't really skip one. I mean, you can skip bare minimum one, and even then you're losing a lot of value. So I would just recommend skipping Pylon Burst when you're going for the Shirking Fortification approach. If you're going for Elemental Aversion, which is a lot more lenient when it comes to the perks itself, then yeah, go for Pylon Burst there. And last is going to be the jewelry. So if you want to go for the most budget approach, you should just go for the Champion's Amulet. You could go for the Champion's Ring and Champion's Earring or Doom Chance Earring or something along those lines. That works fine. Now that's the budget approach. Now if you want to go min-maxing approach, or even just spend a little bit of money but not all in on terms of the jewelry, then the only change there I would recommend is changing your ring. You should go for a thrust damage and invigorated punishment. It could just be a 2-perker. It will be a lot better than the Champion's Ring. But if you want to spend a lot of money, okay, and we're talking about the rings, then the third perk would be something along the lines of Enfeebling, Bloodletting, or Hardy with thrust damage and invigorated punishments. Now that's very expensive. It's really up to you guys to decide how much you want to spend for this build. If you're just playing it and trying it out, I wouldn't recommend spending too much money. Just play with a couple of pieces that you can get for free. And if you like it and you really want to commit into the build, then yeah, go for it. Spend extra money and get a little bit more value for the output of the builds. Now, when it comes to the amulet, this is the most expensive piece of it. Shirking in power or stamina recovery with health, of course. Health is a mandatory perk for everything. And the protection type. Now, the protection type, it's really dependent on your server. It's really dependent on what you're facing and also dependent on what you're playing. Are you playing OPRs? Are you playing wars? Are you playing duels or arenas? It really just depends on multiple different situations. And that's up to you to evaluate. I went for thrust protection a long time ago because bows were just destroying me in everything, in OPRs, in duels, in arenas, in wars. So I went for thrust protection. And there was also PBs back then, so thrust protection was really good. But when it comes to currently, I'm facing mostly fire. So fire mages, and here and there you get to see a couple of greatsword players or spear players, but I would say most of the damage I'm taking currently is from fire. So if I had the chance to change this, I would. At the moment I'm saving up some money, but I would go for flame protection with health and shirking in power. You might be saying, why shirking in power? Why not stamina recovery? You need more stamina to evade, to get in and out, and I agree with that. Like, stamina is amazing, and I would always recommend stamina recovery, but for this particular build, you already have so much stamina gain. You already have the keen speed for the movement speed, and on top of that, you have the Ice Gauntlet, which allows you to regain stamina when you're in Tomb, and just peel for yourself so that you, even if you have stamina downtimes, you can get away with it. Shirking in power is amazing. Like, it's a lot easier to trigger to activate Shirking in power than it is to activate Shirking fortification. If you do testings and you just have a look at your VODs, it's procced. Even if the enemy's not even attacking you, the projectile's coming next to you and you don't even dodge it, you're proccing it as well. You're inside of the entomb, they're hitting you, some of their attacks miss, their projectiles miss, bam, you got Shirking in power. You get out of the entomb, you already have like 8 to 12% bonus damage. It's actually insane. I love it, and I'm gonna keep utilizing it until I really feel the need that it's not providing either the value or I need stamina recovery. But for the meantime, I really like it. And that's why I was saying, like, the Champion's Amulet's a nice one if you don't need a type of protection, which generally it helps for sure, but you got stamina recovery and Shirking in power on that amulet, and it's free, so you could just go for that. As for the weapons, we got the IG and the spear. Now for the IG, you only really need 2 perks. Keen Speed and Healing Tomb would be my go-to. You can get a free Ice Gauntlet from the OPR. It's called the Gripping Rime. It's a Constitution Ice Gauntlet, and it provides you the only perks you really need on this build, and it's obviously free. If you have it, then you should probably just use it. Now, it's not really a big deal that it has Enchanted or not, it's just a little bit extra damage, but it's okay. Now, when it comes to the spear, we're going to talk a little bit more about it. Of course, there's a lot of perks in the bucket here, so what I would say, now this is what I would recommend to everyone, is at least bare minimum have 2 damage perks. Now, your primary damage perk should be Attunement. Any type of Attunement, doesn't really matter. Your option number 2, instead of the Attunement, should be Chain. Now, Chain theoretically says 15% more damage compared to Attunement, which is 14% weapon damage. But the problem is it doesn't work on spells. And on top of that, it's a 2-second cooldown, so in between some attacks, it will not actually proc. Now, Chain does charge up your ultimate faster, your heart rune that is, but it's just less consistent. So attunement's the go-to, chain is the second next best for the attunement replacement. Now for the secondary damage perk, we're talking about Enchanted, Vicious, Keenly Empowered. You can also speculate Rogue, but I wouldn't include Rogue unless you're playing a light build specifically meant to kill healers. This is a build where it does a little bit of everything and you can't guarantee you're always going to be hitting them from the back, so I would not recommend the Rogue. So Enchanted, Vicious, and Keenly Empowered is what I would recommend. I personally love Enchanted. You left click so much with this build, and on top of that, Coup de Grace also procs your Enchanted, so you just got nice consistent damage overall with the spear itself. Now, I'm not against Vicious. I know Vicious got slightly nerfed because crit chance is lower overall. And on top of that, Keenly Powers are really nice, but also you have a little bit of downtime. More burst damage, yes, and it works on your spells when you proc Keenly Empowered, because it empowers everything. But Enchanted is just always uptime. You're going to left click the most out of everything when it comes to the spear itself. So I would recommend Attunement and Enchanted as your 2 perk damage. But if you find something else for cheaper, then go for it. Now, third perk is very situational. You could also just go for another damage perk. Instead of Keen Speed, as you can see here, you could just go Keenly Powered. That's what I have on one of my ult accounts, and it feels amazing. It's a lot of burst damage. But I really like Keen Speed, and I'll show you a little bit later. I'm going to show you guys some tips and tricks regarding certain perks and how Keen Speed interacts with the Ice Gauntlet Keen Speed. But if you don't want to go for the Keen Speed, you can go for the damage perk, you could go for the skewer perk. It's really up to you. It's a little bit of a preference, but you don't really need a third perk. This build actually works fine on just a 2 perker, so we're just going to move from there. As for the gems itself, I would only recommend 2 options. You either go for Rune Glass of Punishing, which will give you an increase of 5% melee damage, or you just don't get any Rune Glass and you go your stereotypical gems. In terms of the type of resistance and percentages, what you should go for really depends on your server. I would recommend just implementing 5 onyxes on the gear itself, and then after that, setting up either rubies or emeralds on your jewelry, because you're going to get the full value of it when it's on your jewelry instead of the rune glasses. You're going to lose a lot more value out of it. And gems for the weapons itself, the only recommendation I would say, and I know it will sound weird because generally you want to have different types of rune glass DOT damage for both your weapons, but in this specific case, you should have the same. And I'll be explaining it a little bit later why you should be having the same type of rune glass casing as your Ice Gauntlet. So either it be Electrified Opal on both weapons, either it be Ignited Opal, Abyssal Opal. It's up to you really to decide what's the cheapest. I would just recommend Electrified or Boreal. I think they're generally the cheapest one lately on my server, but it doesn't really matter. It's up to you to decide. Why is it so tanky? Well, it's so tanky because it has spells such as the Entomb, the Ice Shower also providing 20% Fortify whenever you cast an Ice ability. If you stack with Shirking Fortification and also the Oak Flesh Bomb, you're going to be getting amazing amounts of armor rating. If you combine your spells accurately using the Perforate or the Skewer to get debuffs, you're going to be getting empowerment and also bonus damage from Explode and Weakness, which will amplify your next attacks. Now, a couple of techs here that I'm going to showcasing: the tracking boost, obviously left clicking, cancelling the animation as soon as it's about to hit, and just shifting forwards to get that extra movement speed. A good way to get min-maxing damage output is essentially using left click into the cancel animation of the left click by utilizing a spell immediately afterwards. So a good way to start up is by getting your Ice Shower first. You apply the slow, you apply the Ren, you get a left click for them to be on the walking animation. As soon as they shift once or twice, you get your skewer off, you gap close them. Assuming they have no more stamina, you get the top of them and you sweep them. You do not have any empowerment, either be from the skewer or the perforate. There's no real point just using Coup de Grace. You might as well just use your perforate while they're swept on the floor so that you at least get 20% bonus damage from the perforate itself. It's not going to land all 3 perforates unless they have no stamina. It will land 2 before they can roll out. And of course, if you do have those set empowerments, you should Coup de Grace because it's going to do a lot of damage. Now we're going to talk about the CDRs. Of course, if you use your ice shower first, you drop the pylon and the entomb within your ice shower or under frosted areas, you're going to get CDR for the spells that were on cooldown. And for the spear, if you shift and then you use the spell, you're going to be getting faster cooldown reduction, 20% every time you do it. You can rotate your spells effectively and get that insane amount of uptime with the spear itself. And this is when it becomes a little bit funky with the Pylon Burst tech. With the Rune Glass charging up your runes faster, it's going to be hitting multiple targets and more times because it's going to be Pylon Burst and the normal attack from the Pylon triggering. You could also combo it with the Keen Speed tech, assuming you have Keen Speed on your spear and Keen Speed on your Ice Golem, which is what I have on my main build. Then you're going to have your haste triggered within the pylon attacking for free. And last and foremost, we've got the Rune Glass tech, and as you can see here, it's got multiple instances of lightning, electrified opal triggering them because the pylon is attacking while my spear is also attacking, and they both have the same Rune Glass tech. And that's pretty much all for now, guys. I'll be uploading another video in the future for the light build, including the hatchet as well. If you guys liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.